Hello and welcome to this video on the toxicity of glyphosate. Glyphosate is the primary active ingredient in Roundup, though that is not the only product. It was developed in 1970 and sold in 1974. Glyphosate has now been off patent for 18 years and as of 2007 is the most widely used herbicide in the United States of America. It is a very effective means of restricting weeds in agriculture and even in the home garden. The average use of glyphosate is 300 milliliters to 1 liter per hectare. As of August 2018, it has been the subject of a successful major lawsuit against the largest manufacturer, Monsanto. The premise of which is an association between exposure to glyphosate and cancer. This position is in stark contrast to the scientific view. Considering the lawsuit and long history of use, how does glyphosate work and how toxic is it? First and foremost, glyphosate is a herbicide, which means that it is targeted at weeds, not animals, insects, or other species. It is part of a wide family called organophosphors, which are from a family of chemicals with a poor reputation. The good thing with glyphosate is that it targets broadleaf and grassy plants and leaves some crops unaffected. It is absorbed in 1 to 6 hours. Glyphosate alone cannot be dissolved in water. By combining it with salts, it not only dissolves in water, but also penetrates weeds more effectively. The formulation may also use surfactants which are like soap. These break down lipids and further improve penetration. Part of the reason for this is the absorption through leaves and to some degree through roots. From here, it interferes with the enzyme seen here. This enzyme produces 3 very important aromatic amino acids. These are called aromatic due to the carbon ring. Without these amino acids, the plant cannot grow. Many crops are now genetically engineered to be resistant to glyphosate, which means it can be used on growing crops like wheat, without the need for pinpoint delivery or mechanical weeding. Less work and more yield, which reduces farming overheads. It improves yield, farming cost, and then food availability and price of food. It has replaced some of the most toxic herbicides used before. This covers a wide range of products and chemicals. Some of the more significant are arsenic-based and not only kill weeds but crops and animals. Trace amounts of this are enough to cause long-term problems. Unfortunately, large quantities of these older generation herbicides are used, and this leads to higher trace amounts. Considering this, the actual dose of glyphosate used by farmers is surprisingly small, somewhere between half a litre and a litre of glyphosate per hectare. This is partly because of its potency and partly because of how effective it is. That the target enzyme is specific to only plants means a glyphosate-resistant crop can be watered with this herbicide and still grow. This is another advantage to glyphosate over other herbicides, and especially older generations. Glyphosates are good because of their application and timing. A farmer, for example, could sow their field with wheat, soybeans, or corn. As this starts to grow in the field, other plants may grow as well, specifically weeds. Both groups are growing and using amino acids in core processes, cell division, enzymes, and more. Without these, the plants stop growing. A farmer grows their crop and not only fertilizes it, but sprays glyphosate, using targeted delivery via hand or machine spraying or whole crop spraying when using glyphosate-resistant crops. The entire field is treated. This leads to weeds being suppressed without affecting the crop. The retardation of the weed's root system, it is suppressed. By delivering glyphosate only during crop or weed growth periods, the crop is not harmed in the long term, and weeds do not compete with the crop. This means more plant growth and better nutrition for the plant. This is the only time that glyphosate works, as it does not destroy seeds or similar progeny. This reduces volume used and improves yield. This in turn benefits farmers and the public. Glyphosate is approved as a safe herbicide in nearly every developed country, and most developing countries. There are set limits on how much residual herbicide can be on plants and produce. These are regulated by agencies like the EPA. The only two countries to have outright banned glyphosate are El Salvador and Colombia. Glyphosates are legal in the United States of America, European Union, Australia, Canada, Britain, and more. It has remained in use for more than 40 years. In fact, it is now nearly 50 years of more or less continuous use. Over this time, different countries and groups have raised concerns about safety. The most recent example of this is a decision by the European Union to renew licenses for glyphosate after a review by the Committee for Risk Assessment. This approval was not taken well by some of the members of the public who objected to it. However, the decision of the committee was that glyphosate did not carry a risk associated with cancer or endocrine function. The committee was reviewing this as glyphosate has a tenuous toxicity in humans. A 2016 study used 2,000 micrograms, or 2 grams, which is less than 0.1 of an ounce, per kilogram of body weight in rodents. Taken orally, this was not associated with any adverse genetic outcomes. Other studies have found that it takes 5,000 micrograms per kilogram in rats, and 10,000 micrograms per kilogram in mice. In a larger mammal like rabbits, it takes an acute dose of 2,000 micrograms per kilogram, or more than 200 milligrams per kilogram daily for a week or more. A human is substantially larger than a mouse, rat, or rabbit. It is expected that an average person would need to be dosed with 1,000-fold the average trace amount on most food. A good evaluation of the dose needed is to compare it with food intake. One expert places this at 100 kilograms of glyphosate-treated corn a day for any adverse effect. This is not acute toxicity, and in fact you're more likely to suffer adverse effects from the corn than you are from the glyphosate at that rate. Considering how effective it is and how widely adopted it is, glyphosate has become a bogeyman for some people who believe it is just toxic to humans. A good example of this is the Seralini affair. You will find a link to the Wikipedia article in the description. The short version involved a poorly designed study which was going to demonstrate an association between glyphosate and cancer. It did just this, and because of its poor design, was later overturned when new research was able to demonstrate the utter failure of the experiment. A 2007 study by the EPA in the USA found that glyphosates do not warrant further investigation as an endocrine disruptor. It was tested in the first round of investigation, and that substantiated their conclusion that it was not worth follow-up. This does not mean glyphosate cannot do any harm. Exposure to skin over a long period or in larger doses can cause irritation. This is much like chlorine in pools. In extreme cases, there may be chemical burns. Inhalation is similar to most chemicals. It can cause discomfort and irritation in the throat and nose. This can lead to secondary problems, but overall remedies in a relatively short period. Eye contact is a little more serious. If not washed out, it can cause burns like those on the skin. If this happens in the eye, this is a more significant problem. Use of safety or personal protection equipment mitigates these dangers. Unfortunately, glyphosate is further vilified by varying standards of terminology across different countries, agencies, and scientific fields. These confuse the average person. The two major studies that typify this are the European Union assessment and the IARC report from the World Health Organization. The biggest scandal of the two is the IARC study, something based purely on statistics and epidemiology, but not biological or biochemical reality. It has only 2 levels of low danger, summarily describing no association and possible danger. These are used very conservatively, and at the slightest hint of an association, the possible designation is used in preference, even if it is outlandish or unlikely. The lead author of that article is also accused of suppressing data, studies, and other findings. Further, a statistician tied into the review is claimed to be working for a class action lawsuit within a week of the report's publication. Either way, the committee missed the day of class where you learn correlation does not equal causation. Since so many people feel so very strongly about glyphosate, there may be some room for questions about safety. So how toxic is glyphosate by comparison to other compounds? Commercial concentrations of 41% glyphosate can cause death, but this requires between 85 and 500 milliliters to be consumed acutely. The range of effects varies, with some higher doses only causing comparatively minor symptoms. These are concentrations well beyond the trace amounts on food and in most food. The average quantity found in food is 1 part per million, with the legal limit being 5 parts per million. Parts per million equals 1 microgram. In other words, food has 1 microgram per kilogram consumed. At the most extreme measure, this is 17% of the acceptable safe limit. Further to this, field spray glyphosate mixed the 41% concentrate into 200 or more liters of water. This further dilutes the danger. This is a dilution of 0.006 grams per liter. This is unlike homeopathy. The more dilute you make it does not make it more powerful. It is just that specific. Other compounds are far less specific, but far more dangerous. Salt, for example, has an acute toxicity of 1 gram a kilogram of body weight. Chronic doses of more than 40 grams a day are associated with significant health issues. Given processed food and salt consumption in general, toxicity is surprisingly easy. Arsenic is another common toxin. An older generation of broad pesticides come weed killer use it. Acute doses between 1 and 300 micrograms can kill. Chronic exposure can be as high as 0.6 micrograms a kilogram of body weight and cause long-term neurological and physical symptoms. And then there is water, the direct opposite of poison in the minds of most people. However, it can also be very toxic. An acute dose of 100 milliliters a kilogram of body weight, and chronic doses can deprive the body of essential electrolytes over time. Those who engage in strenuous exercise are at greater risk than most, based on their loss of electrolytes, and consumption of electrolyte-free or imbalanced water. However, they are not the only ones. There are case studies in the description box below that go over differing cases and scenarios in which water can be quite toxic. These are 3 chemicals that show the range of danger. Much to the surprise of many people, the risk of glyphosate toxicity is significantly lower than most compounds you would find in your average household. An ongoing concern with glyphosate is the transfer of resistance genes from glyphosate-resistant GMO crops to weeds and other target species. Currently, this has only been observed in cases of both high doses and improper application scenarios. Further details are in the description. A final concern with glyphosate is the Monarch Butterfly. This is a slightly more complex problem, as it is not a simple thing to dissect. It is a combination of effective weeding, highly specialized species, and the butterfly effect, pun intended. The problem can be summarized to this. The monarch butterfly requires certain plants to reproduce. These plants are considered weeds by large-scale agriculture. By actively removing these weeds with glyphosate, the monarch butterfly population is suppressed, an unintended and unexpected victim of monoculture farming methods. This is not to say glyphosate does not have any problems or concerns, or that Monsanto lacks a history of convictions for misleading advertisements or environmental problems. It does, however, show that glyphosate does not have a direct scientific consensus showing an association between disease and glyphosate. In fact, the opposite is broadly true. Some studies have even demonstrated that glyphosate may improve male health, although these studies are flawed. Thank you for watching this video. If it has been of interest, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.